If you're going through a divorce or a separation or something else that's difficult in your life and you recently got a mental health diagnosis, please watch this video. Please listen to this message. It is so important. I'm a coach. I work with men. I help men move on from divorce. Sometimes diagnoses are useful, but when it comes to divorce, and especially for men going through an unwanted divorce, diagnoses can be incredibly devastating, and in my opinion, they can be downright dangerous. And so if you've had one and you are feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling hopeless, if you're feeling like everything is really lost now in the face of this mental health diagnosis, please stay with me. Please watch this video. There's something that is happening, a way we approach diagnoses in medicine that is really harmful for a lot of people who are going through a difficult time. When I am working with divorced men, what most of them are experiencing is an unwanted divorce. 70 to 80% of divorces in America are filed by women, which means most men didn't want it. They experience it as something that is happening to them that they can't control, and often they're experiencing it as something that is their fault, right? They've been told by their wife or their ex-wife of all of the reasons she's divorcing them, right? All of the things that they did wrong, all of the mistakes that they made, and they recognize some of those, maybe a lot of them, and they say, wow, yeah, there are these things I did wrong. And often in that divorce, because she's leaving and she's stressed, she makes it even more, right? She'll make pretty strong accusations sometimes about what kind of person he is, what this means about him. And so for a lot of men, by the time I talk to them, they're already in a really painful place of self-doubt. They're starting to wonder, what's wrong with me? How could I have failed at my marriage? What if she's right? Am I emotionally stunted? Am I unavailable? Are there all of these things that are really so bad and broken in me? And they're afraid that they might be. They are in this place where it is really hard to find any solid internal footing. They're not grounded in a sense of who they are. And they're really deeply afraid that maybe who they are is something that's not good, that's not lovable, that's not acceptable, that's not worthy. And they are holding on as tight as they can to a hope for the future, because what they thought their future held with this partner, with this family, has now been taken away. And for a lot of them, the hope is, well, maybe I can figure out what I did wrong. Maybe I can make changes. Maybe there's still hope for me to get better. And if I can get better, if I can change, then I can be loved again. Then I can be in a new relationship. They're dancing on the edge here between despair and hope, and they are looking for ways to hold on to that hope. And they are looking for any reinforcement that they deep down, under any mistake they made, that they are worthy, that they're good enough, that they're lovable, that they're good people, because they're afraid maybe they're not, because this is happening. And then they go to a psychologist or they go to a psychiatrist, and if you can tell, I get agitated about this. This makes me so angry when I see it happen to my clients. They go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist and they get a diagnosis. They're told they have bipolar disorder. They're told they're autistic, that they have major depressive disorder, borderline personality disorder, ADHD. The list goes on and on and on, all of the different mental health diagnoses they can receive. You just took somebody who is out there looking for evidence that maybe they're a good person, that maybe they aren't broken beyond repair, and then a doctor sits them down and tells them, oh, this is exactly how you're broken. Here's exactly what's wrong with you. And yeah, it's really hard to fix, but maybe we can manage it, and here's some medication, and we're gonna put you on this wait list to maybe someday get in to see a therapist, and then they send you out the door. But you just took a human being who has just gone through hell in their divorce, losing things that are so important to them, and now it's like a slap in the face. This makes me so upset because honestly, to me, it's malpractice. It's like telling somebody that there's no hope for them. That's how it feels to so many people to get that diagnosis. In that moment, what they need so desperately is hope. And I have been shocked since I started doing this work with men, how many of them admit to me that at some point during the separation or the divorce, they thought about suicide. Right? That's how painful and unbearable this is, and that's how afraid they are that there's nothing to hope for, that there's nothing good left in them, that there's nothing good left for them. That's how desperate this can feel. And then you get this diagnosis just delivered from a doctor, like it's just another fact of life, and here's the evidence that all the things you were terribly afraid of are true. And oh, by the way, it's gonna make it really hard for you to have successful relationships in the future. It's like pulling the ground, the very unstable, earthquakey ground out from under these people. And it is wrong. These diagnoses, this is changing in the world of therapy. It's changing slowly, but more and more and more. Therapists, psychologists, even psychiatrists are coming to recognize that these diagnoses are not what we once thought they were. There's not just this set of disorders in the brain that you can come into the world and you're just broken that way. These things happen to us because of our traumas, because of our childhood experiences, the things that happen to us in relationship. Most of the diagnoses out there are attachment disorders. They are things that happen in response to broken relationship experiences. So I want you to stop reading on the internet about whatever diagnoses you were given. If you need to read something, read Susan Johnson's book, Attachment Theory and Practice. It's written for practitioners, so it's a little bit dense, but Susan Johnson is an amazing psychologist. She describes so clearly where these disorders come from. My favorite description that she gives is bipolar disorder. And the way Susan Johnson understands these problems, if you will, in our brain is that they're not actually problems at all, they are solutions. And at some point in our life, that problem was a solution that we desperately needed. So bipolar disorder is a great example. The way that Dr. Johnson explains it is if you have a child who's in a shitty situation, an abusive situation, where they are being hurt, often physically, by a caregiver, by a parent, so a child in an abusive home, this child is in a really impossible situation. They are completely dependent on the caregiver, right, for survival, for food, for water. They need this person in order to stay alive because children cannot care for themselves. And yet the very person they are dependent on is also the one who is hurting them. So the person they need to stay alive is also the biggest threat to their survival. This is an impossible situation for any human brain, much less the brain of a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old. So what does the child do? Well, the child learns these extreme reactions. The needy, hyper-attentive, come to me, get affection, get attention, keep me alive, right? The eager, the seeking, and then the shutdown, the withdrawal, the depression that protects them from that abuse, that allows them to leave psychologically, to protect themselves from that hurt. They need the highs and lows, the manic and the depressive. They need the swings back and forth in order to survive that situation. How else can you survive in an abusive home when you're a child who's dependent on that caregiver? Right? In that context, the symptoms that we call bipolar disorder are actually a brilliant adaptation, a solution of the brain to survive in an impossible situation. But what happens for all of us is that the tools we learn, the survival strategies that we rely on when we're children, tend to get rigid as we grow up. They become our default way of reacting to a situation, and now we find ourselves as an adult with this disorder. Right? And the way it's given to us, the way it's explained to us, is that it's this malfunction in our brain and there's something just inherently wrong and broken in us. It's not helping anybody. That's not a solution. That is adding to despair and to suffering. When we understand it the way that Susan Johnson does, that anything you're experiencing as dysfunction in your adult relationships, in your way of responding to the world, is founded in a survival skill from childhood. When we understand it that way, we're talking about strategies. You had a strategy you needed back then, a strategy that kept you alive, that saved your life, that allowed you to navigate painful situations. And now as an adult, that strategy doesn't serve you anymore. If that's what's happening, well, then we can go in and change the strategy. And no, it's not that simple, right? We can't just turn off major depressive disorder. We can't just flip a switch and stop these responses, but we can approach them with compassion, and we can approach them with curiosity, and we can start to go back and heal some of those traumatic attachment wounds so that you can start to show up and experience relationships in a new way. None of these disorders, none of these diagnoses are a death sentence for your relationship. That is the most painful takeaway that I see happening for some of the people I've spoken to and the people I've worked with, is they're given these diagnoses and what they understand is that it's dangerous for me to be in a relationship. It's risky for me. It's risky for me and it's risky for the other person. You've just taken somebody who was injured in relationships as a child, and now you've given them a diagnosis that is confirming to them that they have to be alone and isolated in their lives. That is devastating for any human being. And then you do that to a person who is going through a divorce, somebody who just lost their family. I hope you can see the cruelty and the unnecessary cruelty of approaching mental health in this way. Honestly, nothing makes me angrier because it just confirms the fear that this person already has, that it's their fault, that they're damaged, that they're broken, that there's something inherently wrong in them. That's not true. I have worked with a lot of clients in such a wide range of situations. Every one of them and every one of you has a healthy self. There is a hole in there. There is a whole person inside. You are not lost. You are not broken. What you are experiencing, the ways you're showing up, all that is a reflection of what you've experienced and how you've survived and how your big, beautiful, amazing brain has gotten you to this point in your life. And maybe it's not the best way to keep moving forward. Okay, maybe there's some things and changes we need to make, but we can do that. That's work that can be done. That's how these diagnoses need to be approached is, hey, you know what? This isn't a description of something that's inherently wrong and broken with you. This is a description of the survival skill set that you learned as a child. And yeah, it's not really working anymore. So we're gonna work on helping you unwire this pattern and develop new skills. If it was approached that way, that would give people such a breath of hope and opportunity in the moment when they need it. So if you're experiencing this, if you've recently had a mental health diagnosis that has shaken you or left you feeling less stable than you were before, there are some good resources for you. So Susan Johnson is amazing. There's another book. This one just came out. This is The Myth of Normal by Dr. Gabor Mate. If you haven't heard him, he has some amazing podcasts. He does an interview that's on YouTube with Joe Rogan. There's a couple other places he's been interviewed. If you think that your mental health diagnosis means that there's something inherently broken and wrong with you, go and listen to one of Dr. Mate's podcasts. This man will help you understand. He says it so simply and so clearly, and he has done decades and decades of research into this. He will help you understand the true origins of these patterns. And guess what? They are not you. This is not your fault that you're experiencing this. And because you're experiencing it does not mean that you are doomed in relationships. The brain is incredibly plastic. It is incredibly resilient and adaptive. You can change some of these patterns. You can change your responses. There's healing to be done, and it's not easy. It's not flipping a switch. We don't just overcome years of trauma in a moment, but it can be done. He is an excellent resource, and so whatever you're reading or watching on the internet that is scaring you and making you feel hopeless, stop that. Start listening to Dr. Mate. He's an incredible resource. Other resources, because I know your brain, if it's like mine, wants to understand this as completely as possible, especially if you're dealing with depression. Lost Connections by Johann Hari, also amazingly researched, really good insights into depression, what it is, where it comes from. Do antidepressants work? Is that a good option for you? And he also gives you some really concrete ways and tools to start healing from depression. I'm going to give you one more. The Upward Spiral by Alex Korb. This one is an easy read. It's really straightforward and simple. The first half of the book, he describes the neuroscience behind depression, what's actually happening in your brain. And the second half, he gives you simple, clear, concrete steps that you can take to start to turn things around, start to make that spiral move upwards instead of downwards. So these are places to start. If you are watching or reading anything that is making you feel more hopeless, I beg you to please stop. This is not a problem with you. This is a problem with our system. This is a problem with our culture. And this is a problem with the way that many, many doctors and psychologists communicate these diagnoses to their patients. Please take some time and educate yourself. Reach out, learn about these other perspectives, the research that supports it, and the paths to healing that actually work and are available to you. It's the end of my rant. Thank you for joining me. I hope nothing else, the next thing you'll do is go Google interview with Dr. Gabor Mate and watch one of them. It'll make a big difference for you right now. Thanks for being here. I'll hope to see you in the next video.